Meister Έκkhart lived between 1260 and 1327. He was a Dominican scholar, a popular preacher and a teacher in Paris, Strasbourg, and Cologne. Today he is one of the most powerful influences on the cutting edge of Christian mysticism and a key link between Eastern and Western insights into the evolution of human consciousness. The Church excommunicated this German master, even though he claimed to be its loyal son to the end of his days. Everything he wrote concerning the encounter with the divine was based on immediate personal experience, and that is why he is as vital a guide in the 21st century as he was at the beginning of the 14th. His disciple John Tauler, who was also a great spiritual teacher, told the priests who were condemning him, "He spoke to you from the point of view of eternity, but you understood him from the point of view of time." Έκkhart had an extraordinarily modern understanding of the nature of being and of human psychology. He saw us as fragmented and separated from our source of origin, with an irrepressible orientation toward our spiritual unity. But he provided no dogma as signposts on the way. He considered it better to say what God is not rather than what God is. He believed that each person had to find his or her own path to the Godhead within, and that this search could take place anywhere. In simplest terms, he believed that God is immediately present to us, and that through the abandonment of our lower selves and their world of multiplicity, we can be filled with the eternal illumination of the unmediated, inexpressible Godhead. He hints at this view of reality when he states that God expects the soul to progress to that point where it may receive much. Progress is therefore equated with knowing, a knowing which is not based on empirical observation or rational comprehension, but rather on an inner, higher level of consciousness which transcends the material world. Meister Έκkhart considered the intellect as the element in us which opens onto higher spiritual spheres. This perception makes of it far more than the workings of the reasoning mind. The intellect is the agent within the soul which is perfectly sensitive to God, because it is of God's order and not made from nature. Awareness of reality comes through the development or transformation of this agent into God. The consciousness of the nearness of God reveals for Έκkhart that all reality depends on the invisible and immanent reality of the divine. The material, historical dimension of reality is seen as the lowest level from which the soul must become detached. This most important idea of detachment assumes that time and space are fragments, and that unity, the highest good and truth, is found only in God. The soul's knowledge of God is hindered by time and space because their multiplicity veils the unity from which everything comes. If I am to know true being, I must know it where it is being itself, and that is in God, and not where it is divided among creatures. Knowing God outside of time and space means knowing God in God's fullness and purity. For Έκkhart, this is the kingdom of God, the state of being in which all creation is known in its essence, the origin and home of the soul. The ascent of the soul to the kingdom of God is an inward journey. God is within, we are without. The consciousness of God excludes the consciousness of oneself until one finds oneself again in God. Here Έκkhart is suggesting a merger with the divine, where no medium separates the soul from the Godhead. The intellect must have no existence of its own in order to be filled with the only true existence. This union is accomplished in the moment when the receptive intellect is transformed into God's fullness. Becoming one with the Spirit of God is the way to unity, rest, and true freedom. For Έκkhart, God is always near to us, and we are far from God to the extent that we are lost in the passions, in the senses, and in the fragmentation which we take to be ourselves. The dwelling among us of the Word made flesh is the entrance of the uncreated into the emptied created, of eternity into time. Έκχαρτ avoids what church dogma would consider heresy by distinguishing between the only begotten, the natural Son of God, and those begotten from a rebirth that leads to conformity with this divine nature. This difference makes us sons and daughters by adoption, though Έκχαρτ insists that our natures are fused with the divine nature. To achieve union with God, which is actually to receive God, there can be no medium between the soul and the Godhead. The intellect therefore must have no existence of its own in order to be filled with the only true existence. Meister Έκkhart believes that when this emptying is achieved, the soul is lifted up to God and established in an eternal turning away from all darkness. God's presence then shines through this emptiness and reveals God in all that we do and see. He leaves us with these words: "You ought to sink down out of all your yourness and flow into His Hisness, and your yours and His ought to become one mind, so completely that you with Him perceive forever His uncreated isness and His nothingness, for which there is no name."
Και αυτή η ανάληψη προς τα πάνω είναι η έκρηξη της αντιβαρύτητας μέσα σου. Τα δύο αυτά είναι εκφράσεις, περιγραφές για το ίδιο πράγμα. Αυτό που βίωσα λοιπόν ήταν η έκρηξη της ψυχής μου προς τα πάνω. Ήτανε σαν να ακυρώθηκε, μάλλον σαν να αντιστράφηκε η βαρύτητα και σαν να άνοιξε, ας πούμε, όπως ανοίγει γη και σε καταπίνει, ξαφνικά γίνεται ένας σεισμός, ανοίγει γη και σε καταπίνει, λέμε έτσι, και πέφτεις ή πέφτεις, ξέρω εγώ, από ένα κτίριο ή οτιδήποτε, πέφτεις. Με τον ίδιο, αυτό ακριβώς συνέβη, με τη διαφορά ότι ανέβηκα. Αυτό δεν είναι μια εμπειρία αστρικής προβολής, αστρικού ταξιδιού. Γιατί εκεί, όταν φεύγεις, όταν βγαίνεις από το σώμα, συνεχίζει να υπάρχει ένας πόλος έλξης προς τα κάτω. Ανεβαίνεις μεν προς τα πάνω, αλλά αργά. Δεν ανεβαίνεις σαν να πέφτεις προς τα πάνω, με όλη τη δύναμη της βαρύτητας. Δεν σε τραβάει το πάνω όπως σε τραβάει το κάτω όταν, ας πούμε, πέσεις από ένα κτίριο κάτω. Αυτή είναι η διαφορά, ότι απλώς επιπλέεις στον αέρα και ανεβαίνει σιγά σιγά. Ενώ στην εμπειρία που διηγούμε, πέφτεις προς τα πάνω με τρομακτική ταχύτητα. Κατ' ουσίαν μετατρέπεσαι σε φως, μετατρέπεσαι σε μια ενέργεια η οποία διατρέχει το σύμπαν με τη ταχύτητα της σκέψης, πηγαίνοντας κατακόρυφα προς τα πάνω. Προς τα πάνω δεν είναι μεταφορά, είναι κυριολεξία.
God's presence then shines through this emptiness and reveals God in all that we do and see. He leaves us with these words: you ought to sink down out of all your yourness and flow into his hisness, and your yours and his ought to become one mind, so completely that you with him perceive forever his uncreated isness and his nothingness, for which there is no name.